Hello viewers, my name is Adam.
And I am Aaron.
This is Seeking Media Productions, bring you another TV review.
So, The Last of Us has finally ended with its first season.
Yes, and when the series finishes, we'll probably do the series review. As this show, after a very successful first season, has been renewed. So they're going to be adapting Last of Us Part 2, which is a video game review that we have on our channel.
That is true. Now, we're no stranger to The Last of Us mythos. We played the video games, and of course, we had to go dive deep into this series once we figured out they was actually going to do it.
I was hesitant, to say the least, when going to this, watching this series like for decades now, ever since video games were a thing. Yeah. Adapting them to live action has not always been the more well-received group, and it is a difficult task to adapting a different medium, especially something as actually is more of an interactive experience,
which is usually like the biggest impact when you actually think of what truly drives a video game franchise. The concept that the audience actually has an active role in determining how the story goes. But taking something like The Last of Us, which is very much a story-driven game, is no small feat, considering that the heart of the series is the relationship between two characters, that of Joel and Ellie. And that dynamic, when done beautifully in the medium for which it was created, i.e. the video game space, is something that is almost uncomprehensible when you think about placing that into another medium such as a television series or even a movie. The concept of whether or not it's the best idea to retell the story that was already done and done well, and again.
HBO is like literally the most highly credible television network to be making content.
Game of Thrones, True Blood, Boardwalk, what's that one? Yeah,
Boardwalk
Empire, The Sopranos.
And they brought on board to help translate The Last of Us into a television was the showrunner of the HBO miniseries Chernobyl by Craig Mazin.
Now, if you was ever to find a dream team, that was definitely going to be it.
And Craig Mazin teaming up with video game the developer Neil Druckmann, along with PlayStation, backing this development up with Naughty Dog Productions. We'll say that before jumping the gun with what we overall feel about it, it was a very promising and, for the most part, satisfying run on television.
That is true.
So, what is the story of what the game is adapted?
Yet again, we are into a new variation of what we would consider to be a post-apocalyptic society, in which a great infection has stripped the world worldwide. In this particular case, it's not a virus per se that is usually the case when it comes to these kinds of scenario. No, this time it comes from a unique source, the fungal world.
Yes, and right off the bat, the show, how it adapts material, for the most part, it does adapt basically the broad strokes of the plot that was from the video game. And most of the changes that were made, they're most of the time they're contextual in nature.
Yeah, it's like some slight things, maybe a particular choice that a character made down the road,
or motivation,
or motivation was maybe altered, or it was made to be a little bit more digestible for individuals or audience members who may not have played the original content.
But for the most part, it's actually a really more faithful adaptation than most other adaptations previously.
So be that as it may, let's talk about the story's characters, as in this particular storyline actually lives and dies with these particular individuals involved.
Yeah, it's take on the old classic tale of the Baron Cub scenario. Pedro Pascal, who plays the main character of Joel, taking on the role of a protector of sorts of a character by the name of Ellie, played by Bella Ramsey.
The dynamics between these two actors is just as engaging as once you had first were adapted or seen these characters live and breathe in the video game space. Joel, yet again, is a individual who is suffering from his past, and has now found a new meaning and a hope with his companion partner Ellie.
And for like from the traumatic events they experienced prior to at the start of the epidemic and to where the story starts, the show slowly but surely showcase the type of person Joe is when faced with a lot of trepidation.
This is not a world for this, for the soft-hearted. No, things have literally fallen on deaf ears. It's gruff, it's gritty, it's very brutal. The stakes couldn't be higher.
And for someone who really had to do a lot to survive, it would have been very easy for Joel to be a very unlikable character to follow the story with.
But you understand him through almost every action or reaction that he has.
And Pedro Pascal does a lot of the nuanced charisma that he usually brings to the table with his roles, helps anchor that performance down.
And then when you look at the performance of Bella Ramsey, who is portraying Ellie, my God, this is a role where I didn't honestly believe anybody else was going to be do just as great as a job as what it was done in the video game, because it required so much of the actress to instill so much of herself in it and to make us believe that these stakes were are overwhelming, but at the same time has such a grit and fire lit within them to try and rise above all of it.
And with Ellie, who was a character who is basically placed with a big burden on her shoulders with a possible way to end all of end the situation that the whole world finds itself in,
i.e. the affection in total.
It took a lot. You had to find a great actress to help anchor in all those emotions, and Bella Ramsey does a good job. And the thing is, like, in some ways, the series is like a slight alternate version of what the video game was, but it still stayed true to what it's trying to tell. And along the way, most of the time, Bella Ramsey and Pedro Pascal's Joel and Ellie, they're the main characters that you are going from each episode, while introducing basically just like glorified guest stars.
Yeah.
Anna Torv, I've seen her from Netflix's Mindhunter. She played Tess. Anna Torv, this could have easily been
a throwaway role,
especially like for a lot of these characters that are come and go.
They did not need to play as hard as they did, but my God, did they give it their all.
And the glimpse that we saw Tess's character before, like during the a brief time skip between where the series starts and begins, like. I would have liked to have seen, possibly extend, like if the show had more episodes, I would like to have seen a more exploration to Tess.
And honestly, I think that's the brilliance of this show is that this show does not. I would say that it definitely does an outstanding job in flushing out the nuances between the characters and the evolvements of the storyline as it evolves.
For jumping off of that point. Another character that basically has a whole episode to themselves. Bill and Frank, played by Nick Offerman, and Murray Butler was able to do with Frank and Bill. Was able to recontextualize only a hinted at experience and story that was told in the video game and explored it into something that had a completely different direction, and what really is derived from what I brought up was an alternate take of what the video game was. It was very much an alternate direction on what type of relationship that was only hinted at in the video games. But with the very few changes or expansion of what they were able to do with the story, it just drives home what they were able to really stay faithful to, especially with characters like Sam and Henry.
Now, we gotta come clean. The episode that involves these particular characters, Sam and Henry, was an episode that we felt that we didn't need to watch. So we completely skipped that one.
Yeah, we played the video game when it was out.
Yeah.
And I knew, when the series was being adapted, how as soon as I know that these two characters were cast.
And that they said that it was going to be really faithful towards what happens in the storyline. We just had that feeling that, you know what, we went through this already once. There's no need to go through it again.
Throughout the series, they always do previews and stuff. So it's not like we know.
We knew what was going to go on. We knew, and then it's later down the road.
The significance of their characters and what they had, the impact that they had on Ellie,
exactly,
specifically. It still stayed true as a lingering influence on the direction in which they took that character.
Mm-hmm.
And while also many of the spectrums of the different types of characters and relationships that help populate and fulfill what was once a lively world, it also talks about the horrors of it as well. And pretty much not to get too much deep into these characters on the story. The character of David, it really embodies
just
all that was wrong about the world.
Yeah, if anything that could go wrong has gone wrong. Wow, do y'all not actually just sit down and actually think about, how bad we see how it is in games? Let's think about how much we can make it even worse.
Yeah, although there's a lot of instances, especially with the Henry and Sam situation, where what they don't do, they don't do when adapting the game, they amplify the emotion of some characters or situations to heighten the effect. But all this is held together with a very, very tight and focused production.
Wow.
Craig Mazin, who helped develop the show with Neil Druckmann, they were able to bring to life the grounded but yet naturalistic beauty that a post-apocalyptic setting, what you wouldn't think of a apocalyptic setting would have, but also its horrors. With so much of what they were able to visually convey from video game to live action, they do unfortunately, for what they couldn't do is pretty obvious.
Yeah.
And this is mainly for the fact that not only, despite from the Bill and Frank story in which that was the only major plot change from where the story direction took place in the video game, the overall biggest change of the series, The Last of Us, is basically how the fungus or infection comes to place. And unfortunately enough, how they do it how they explain it, it kind of I call it question the logic of how easily that was able to
how people got infected in the first place. I mean, in the games, it's more of
airborne.
Airborne. Thank you, airborne. Where in this case, it's more of a tactile situation, which is affecting when it makes you really think, wow, especially how people are affected, how quickly it spreads, and I really had to think about, would that actually happen in that way, the way that you're trying to, convey it. I don't know.
But it's not only the quality of the logic; it also affects the production limits, the limitations of the budget, because they decide to go about the way in which they affect people. It also takes away one significant visual aspect from the video games is the mere fact that. Because it was airborne in the video games, you lose the sense of spores that's always present. It's basically a signature marker of what differentiates The Last of Us from other zombie shows. They keep the clickers, and one instance,
they are still terrifying, no matter how you look at it.
But they are very limited on which they are when they're present. So, so much of the human drama is very much adapted. a lot of the actual infected world
is barely actually shown.
One of the major things that I criticize any type of TV or film is I shouldn't see your budget.
Yeah.
And that's one of the major aspects of why this adaptation is not as well as it could have been. It really helped that so much of the behind the scenes talent was on display for the series, from appearances of Ashley Johnson and Troy Baker, who were the original Joel and Ellie, and also they brought in the actual video game composer to help bring back some of the cues and motifs from the video game, while also having the main title sequence. The song is that.
So where does it fall? How do we feel about the series, at least this season?
I would say that because they've stayed true to the plot and the story, and highlighting a lot of the resonating relationships that are so integral to what makes The Last of Us stands apart, I would say this first season makes for some very great television.
That's true. I totally am fully behind that. It is a great season, first season. Not to say that it can't go higher up from here. This is easily something that could become amazing, if not epic, depending on how you decide to go and adapt the second part.
Second part, it has a very tough hurdle to go by because the second part is very controversial and its subject matter. If you recognize while I discussed part 2 video game review, you understand a lot more about how that stands. But the thing is, right now is a solid outing.
Yeah, so right now you heard it from us. Season 1 of The Last of Us is great. We definitely look forward for part 2, and whatever more that this team has got is going to bring us. So that's it for our review right now. As always, please like, share, and subscribe, and hit the bell down there at the bottom for notifications if you want to get more of this coming at you.
Please be sure to look at our social media outlets on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter for content we do not post on this channel.
Yeah, because, there's only so many hours in a day, and, we can't do it all at once.
And again, my name is Adam.
And I'm Aaron.
And this has been a Sticky Media Productions.
See you later.